Good evening, everyone. We are going to be in chapter 24 tonight, of course, of the book of Acts, and by now your Bible, I'm sure, does open right up to the book of Acts. So if it doesn't, then there's probably something wrong with your Bible. But we are going to be in chapter 24. We're coming kind of to the end of the road here, in the book of Acts, and we're going to continue on as we've been discussing the last couple weeks. We're going to go into church history. We're already in church history, yes. We've been in the Gospel of Matthew in the study before this. And so now we're in Acts, the beginning of the New Testament church. And then the scriptures take us up through about the first century, up to almost like 100 AD. So we're going to continue on that in historical accounts and narratives after that situation, or after this study, I should say. So as we do so often, let us get into a little bit of review to recall the context of where we are tonight. Obviously, if we're in chapter 24, thank you. We came through chapter 23 last week. And in chapter 21, we get to the end of the three mission journeys that we see recorded in the book of Acts by Paul. We know that there's many other mission journeys going on by the other apostles, and we'll talk about that actually in our next study. We are tracking, remember our red line and everything, we're tracking Paul. So we've seen him with Paul, with Barnabas. We've seen him on the second one with Silas and Timothy and Luke and Aquila and Priscilla, and on and on and on with the names. But the main character, right, of our story here has been Paul. It shifted really in the early book of Acts because it was who at first? Barnabas was some, but it was really kind of Peter. I mean, in the apostles. Peter, the first. It was essentially Peter from the day of Pentecost, Peter and John, and Peter to the Jews. And then we saw that transition from the Jews to the Samaritans, and then to essentially Paul and the Gentiles. And that's where we've been camped out here. And so we've been through the three mission journeys. We don't need to go through all those slides tonight. You've seen them a bunch, and we'll review them in the next study as well. But when we get to chapter 21, we come to the end of the third journey. He made his way to Jerusalem, and it's about 57 AD now. So in our mind, that's our timeline. So we're about 30 years, call it 28 years after the ascension of Christ. Paul is early 50s to mid 50s. He's about 52 to 55 years old right now. Okay, so that's where we are. And he has now made it to Jerusalem, where we have seen a few things. He gets there, we know the Jews aren't happy about it, and in fact we saw James in the church say that, hey, you should do some things that will accommodate the Jews who are now believers, but they're struggling with what do we do with the law, what do we do with circumcision, and there's that whole battle that's going on inside of them. And so Paul goes with some of them, remember, to cleanse and be purified with some of them in the temple, and to show, remember, that he's a good Jew indeed, and that the things that the Jews have been hearing about him are not true. So he goes along with that, but what happens when he gets to Jerusalem is, it said, some Jews from Asia, so another group of Jews come and accuse him and say, hey, we've seen him desecrating the temple by bringing a Gentile into it, and he's the one that's misleading all the Jews all over the world, all over the place, and telling them lies, and we need to deal with this guy. So they take him outside the temple, they start beating him, and remember Claudius Lysias, the Roman commander, who stepped in and intervened, which we know, was placed there by the Lord to protect Paul and to stop him from being murdered at that point. And so Lysias takes him up the stairs into custody. And remember chapter 22, he is allowed to speak from the stairs to the Jewish audience down there that was just trying to kill him. And they listen to him until he gets to the point of saying Jesus is the Christ that we've been looking for. Now they want to rip him apart again. Lysias takes him into the barracks to keep him safe. And then the next day, he takes him before the Sanhedrin, before the council of the Pharisees and Sadducees. That's chapter 23, where we were last week. And remember what happened. Paul gets in there, and he knows that he can use one specific weapon that he has. And he kind of rolls that hand grenade right in the middle of the room by dropping it, saying, well, the real reason that I'm here and on trial today is because I'm a Pharisee. I'm the son of a Pharisee, and I believe in the resurrection of the dead. And it's the hope that I have in that. That's why I'm on trial right now. So what did he just do? He just parted the room and had the Pharisees now and the Sadducees going at each other's throats. And so Lysias, the commander, sees this. And remember, it said that he feared that they would tear Paul to pieces, is what it said. So he took him out of there to protect him. Now, in the midst of that, we find a group of over 40 Jews that make a vow and say, we will not eat or drink until we kill this guy Paul. So what we want you to do, members of the council, leaders of the Sanhedrin, we want you to call him back and have Lysias bring him like you have more questions for him, and when he's on the way, we're going to kill him. But what happens? Remember? Who overheard it? Little boy, Paul's nephew. Okay, so Paul's nephew overhears. He tells Paul, he tells Lysias, and the commander then gives charge and gives commands to 470 trained Roman soldiers and horsemen, and gives horses for Paul to ride on to be transported from Jerusalem to Caesarea. So we see, again, remember, God's sovereign hand on it all, because he's going to take and do it on the Roman authorities and give the protection that he wants to give to make sure that Paul makes it. Because remember what he did. He came by night, Jesus did, to Paul and said, not to fear, because just as you have testified of me or witnessed of me in Jerusalem, you also must do at Rome. So Paul knows now that he's going to Rome, and he knows that he has a God that's going to protect him and make sure he gets to Rome. So like we said last week, he got a good night's sleep that night, not having to worry about what's going to happen to him, because he knew already what Jesus had told him. Okay, so we wrap up chapter 23 there with Lysias sending him and sending a letter with the soldiers to the governor who is at Caesarea. So Caesarea, remember, is the place where Herod's praetorium was, where the king's palace is. That's where the governor is. That's kind of the quarters of where they are at. And so the governor at that time, his name is Felix. And so he sends him with a letter to Felix. And remember, the letter states, hey, here's what's happened so far. These Jews want to kill the guy. I found nothing wrong with the guy. Remember, I found out he was a Roman soldier, but he doesn't tell him how he found out he was a Roman soldier, remember, because that would have got him in trouble, because he put him in chains twice and he almost flogged him once. Remember that? So he doesn't tell him that, but he sends a letter and says, I find nothing wrong with the guy. I'm sending him to you because they're going to kill him here, and I don't really know what to do. I tried to find out the truth and I can't, so I'm sending him to you. So that's where we end chapter 23, by Felix meeting Paul, reading the letter, and he asks Paul, where are you from? And he says, from Cilicia, because remember, where is Paul from? What's the name of the city that Paul's born in and from? Tarsus, good. And that is in Cilicia. So that's where he says he's from. And Felix closes out chapter 23 for us by saying, when your accusers arrive here, then I will give you your trial and your hearing. So he's got to wait for the Jews to come that made these accusations before he can put him on trial. Okay, so that's where we end chapter 23. And verse 1 is where we begin chapter 24. So let us do that. And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with with some elders and a spokesman, one Tertullus. They laid before the governor their case against Paul, and when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation, in every way and everywhere we accept this with all gratitude. But to detain you no further, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly. For we have found this man a plague, or some versions I like better, Nasby says a pest. One who stirs up riots among all the Jews throughout the world, and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. And he even tried to profane the temple, but we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to find out from him about everything which we accuse him. The Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that all these things were so. And when the governor had nodded to him, Paul replied, knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. You can verify that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogue or in the city. Neither can they prove to you what they are now bringing up against me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection both of the just and the unjust. Verse 16. So I always take pains to have a clear conscience towards both God and man. Now after several years I came down to bring alms to my nation and present offerings. While I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple without any crowd or tumult. But some of the Jews from Asia, they ought to be here before you to make an accusation. They said if they had anything against me. Verse 20. Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the council. Other than this one thing that I cried out while standing among them, it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you this day. Verse 22. But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, when Lysias, the tribune or the commander, comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody but have some liberties, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs. After some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was a Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him about faith in Jesus Christ. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control in the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, go away for the present time, and when I get an opportunity, I will summon you again. At that time, he hoped that money would be given to him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. And when 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. Let's pray. Father, we love you. We thank you for this day. We thank you for this time. We thank you for your word. Thank you that it is inerrant, that it is perfect, that it speaks to us, that it nourishes us and nurtures us, Lord, and that's what we ask that you would do to us tonight with it. We ask that you would increase our knowledge about you and give us application in our own lives, Lord. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. Back to verse 1. Coming up the heels of what happened, they now arrive in Caesarea. And he said, remember, when they get here, when your accusers get here, then I'll hear your case. So it says 5 days later, the high priest Ananias, who we've already seen and been introduced to, remember as Paul was introduced to him as he told somebody to punch him in the face, remember that? And Paul calls him out and says, God's going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. And so that whole situation a couple weeks ago. So this is what happens. The high priest comes down, he brings elders, and they bring this spokesman. That would be this man Tertullus, essentially a attorney or a lawyer that's going to speak on the behalf of the council, on behalf of the Jewish leaders. Okay, so Paul is now summoned before Tertullus by the governor, by Felix. And now the accusations can come because now both parties are there. We've all seen a courtroom kind of scene. That's what we're talking about. That's what's happening here. And so he says now we see the buttering up, right? Did you catch that immediately? Immediately Tertullus began saying, since you've been the governor, we have peace and we're so happy and we're so thankful that it's you who's in charge. And because of you, you've done such great things. And now we don't want to bother you for too long. It says, I don't want to detain you any further. Like, I don't want to waste your time anymore here. I beg you to just grant us this thing real quick. This won't take long for you to realize that we're right and that guy's wrong. And just essentially he's saying what? Like, just hand him over to us, dude, and we'll get this mess out of your hands and you don't have to deal with this anymore. So we have found this man to be a pest. I like that. To be a pest. And he stirs up dissension among the Jews. And, look right there in verse 5, he's a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Somebody tell us, while I get a drink real quick, what are they talking about? What's all that saying? What does he mean that he's a ringleader? We know he stirs up the Jews. How does he stir up the Jews? By preaching the gospel. Right, and the Jews hate him because they don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ. Okay, so now it says he's a ringleader for the sect of the Nazarenes. What does that mean?
Then he go with the two other people and
yeah, like he does. He's part
right.
of that.
Then he go to the temple, right, and actually do the. So maybe they think that he's starting.
So that's the Nazarene vow.
Right.
I'm following you now. Okay, this refers to like Nazarenes, people from Nazareth.
Like
so that
Jesus the Nazarene?
Right, like that might help you a little more now. Nazarene is the area that Jesus of Nazareth, right? Jesus the Nazarene. That's who we're talking about. So while believers remember, what are believers calling this movement, this Christian movement we're talking about? What are they calling it? The way, right? Well, you see here now what the Jews call it. They call it a sect. a cult. Okay, they call it a sect or a cult of the Nazarenes because Jesus was a Nazarene, and so they're saying, oh, well, that's just that cult from that fellow that was a Nazarene. So they're calling it a cult. This Christian movement, which most of the world today still calls it a cult.
That's what happens when you're hungry, because those guys, they're still not eating or drinking, right? He's still alive, so
there you go.
They're like 15 days without food. They're seeing stuff.
Yeah, they've been eating, bro. Don't even worry about that. Yeah, they've been eating. Don't worry about that. But now he wants to kind of throw even more in there because, again, they come with verse 6 that he even tried. But remember what that was all about? That Trophimus, the Ephesian, had gone to the temple because they said he saw him in town with him.
Right.
And so then they said, oh, he took him in the temple where he's not supposed to be, trying to accuse him of something that they could kill him for. Okay, and that's what they were doing. And then I actually skipped a verse because I have the ESV and this verse is not in there, but it is an asterisk or a mark there. Some of you might have noticed that. But verse 7, in most versions, NASB is the one I use as well, but the one I'm reading from here tonight is ESV. It says, but the chief captain Lysias, that commander guy, came and with great violence took him out of our hands. Okay, you see that? So that's what he's saying. He said, look, we tried to take him and we seized him, and remember they did seize him. They're beating the tar out of him. They were going to kill him. And it says, but that Lysias, your commander that's back there, see the Jew card they're playing? Remember that thing goes both ways? Well, he, by brute force, just took him from us. He interrupted what we were doing. And so that's what they're trying to bring to him and trying to kind of point off this thing onto Lysias as if by some reason this had been Lysias' fault. Okay? I want to pause there because I'm looking at my notes and I had this note, this thought in there. We were just talking about this before dinner tonight. Most of us were here at that time talking about this. This is where America's headed. This is where we're going. This is where most of the world is, that believers are labeled as pests and as a nuisance, that we are not tolerant, that we are not about peace, that we are, in fact, about, being divisive and disrupting, and all the stuff that we talked about, I don't even have to go into because we already talked about it for like 20 minutes. That's what we're talking about. It's no different. That's what the apostles were doing, and that's the persecution they were getting for it. And that's what all around this globe today are getting for the same exact thing. Okay, so it shouldn't be any shock to us that it's coming. And it's coming, guys. It's coming down the pipeline, okay? We don't know when it's coming, to what degree it's going to get bad, and it's coming, okay? And it is here to some degree, okay? I would agree with that. So Lysias, this commander, he took him by force. And remember, we met Lysias. He's been the commander we've been talking about for like 3 chapters. We just got his name last chapter in chapter 23. And so he ordered him to be brought before you with his accusers. And so that's why we're here. The Jews are annoyed because they had to come over to Caesarea to do this thing. Because why? They wanted to take care of it on their own. And they wanted Lysias, the commander, to just hand him over to them and not be a pest that he's being by trying to find out the truth of this whole matter. But again, God's the one pulling the strings and doing what he wants to do, and that's what's going to be done. Okay? So I want you to understand here, the reason I'm bringing up verse 7 and parking there for a minute is because this was a big deal. For the Jews to bring this charge against a Roman officer was a big deal. Okay, they could get in trouble for this by saying that, oh, well, they're trying to add light on the Roman governor, to his boss. Right. So that's not a good thing when they could get caught on it not being true. Okay, but apparently, in which we know from later on in the chapter and next week, that Lysias is not there yet. Okay, so he's not there to speak up. Still back where he was when he was doing those things. Okay,
they're getting frustrated. Is what it is.
Certainly, they're tired of this guy, bro. Right? Yes, sir.
Why is verse 7 completely missing from ESV?
It is on certain versions, and it's in here as a footnote, and a lot of versions will do that. So I don't want to go down too far down the rabbit trail, but there's many. NIV has tons of verses missing. But versions, because it just depends on the text. The original text that they're translating from that they feel is the best translations. Okay. Some of them had them, and a couple did not, and so they will leave it out and put it in as a footnote. It's still there, but they don't feel that it would be in there. But it's still there for us. Sure. So, and always look for that. If it's not in there, if you're reading an ESV, there should be a little number or something right there before verse 8 that will show and denote. Go look down and find that, and it'll give you where that verse is down at the bottom. It should be footnoted somewhere.
Yes.
Okay? So, he brought Paul before the Sanhedrin to find out what he was accused of. Remember, that's the whole point. Lysistrus just doesn't want to get in trouble. You know what I mean? He's accountable for this, and he wants to do his due diligence in finding out. I mean, he doesn't have any reason to side with Paul against the Jews. He just wants to know the truth of the matter, and that's what he, remember, took him to the council in chapter 23. He said to find out the truth of these accusations and if they hold water at all, and which he found they didn't. And we're going to see neither of them. So the Jews say, by examining him yourself, and remember how Lysias was going to examine him was by flogging, and thought that'll get the truth out of him. So they're saying by examining him yourself, you'll be able to see the accusations that we make are true. And now the rest of the Jews jump in and yeah, we're right, they're right. We were there, we saw it. They jump in to affirm the things that this Tertullus, this attorney is saying. So now Paul gets the shake and gets the nod and gets to bring his side of the story. And it's going to sound familiar because, look, we've already seen, remember that we've seen in chapter 22 already, Paul gave his defense on the staircase to the Jews already one time. Then he went to the council and gave his defense a second time. Now he's in front of Felix again to give his side of the story for the third time. Okay, and remember that Luke, we were saying last week, that Luke's intentional. The Holy Spirit has Luke being very intentional about recording all of this down so that the facts are there, that over and over and again we're going to see the Roman authorities find nothing wrong with him, that he committed no crime and he did nothing.
It's like Christ, right? It's
Exactly.
Like right
exactly
before.
like Jesus, same kind of thing. Okay, exactly. So Paul begins his speech. He begins his defense. And he gives polite words too, but in a different manner. You can see how the Jews that appeared were just kind of sucking up and kissing up to Felix. Paul gets some pleasantries as he says, knowing that you've been a judge here for many years, I cheerfully or gladly make my defense to you. Okay? And what Paul's saying here is he's happy, and the fact that he's going to say it to the next governor and to King Herod Agrippa in the next chapter, next two chapters as well, the same thing, because he is happy that this governor, Felix, has been around for a while. He is very well rehearsed and familiar with the ways of the Jews, with the Jewish religion. In his district, if you will, in his precinct, in his area. And so this would be beneficial to Paul because he's familiar with these things. This ain't the first case he's heard about the Jews accusing people of things. Okay, you can count on that. So that's why Paul is saying these things, that he is happy that he is in fact informed about the way the Jews handle business. Okay, so he says, take note of the fact that no more than 12 days, right from verse 11, you can verify and take note of the fact that no more than 12 days ago I went up to Jerusalem. Remember we saw that. That was chapter 21. He got to Caesarea. He stayed with Philip. He went up to Jerusalem. And that's the time frame we're talking about. So from that time in chapter 21 to right now where we're at, he's saying no more than 12 days have passed. So in fact, he says in that time, neither in the temple, the synagogue, or the city did they ever find me speaking to someone and causing an uproar and stirring up the crowd. Just didn't happen. Okay? Nor can they prove any of the charges which they accuse me of before you today. I mean, Paul's just saying, look, these dudes are liars, right? Paul's just saying none of this stuff is true. It's all a lie, and it won't take you long to figure that out. They say it won't take long to hold me responsible, but they're the ones who are lying, and they have no proof of what they're saying. And think about it. Why does he bring up the 12 days? He's saying, I've been only 12 days. I couldn't even done all the stuff that they're accusing me of. Right? That's where my brain was going. It's like, how could he do this and cause a mob and a ruckus and all this stuff when essentially the day he came into the temple is when they took him out and tried to stone him, and Lysias stepped in and took him. So really the majority of those 12 days, he's been under Roman custody. So when did I do all this? When could all this have even happened? When was I such a guy that got the whole city in an uproar here? Okay? But, and as Martin Lloyd Jones thank God for the buts in the Bible. I just always love that quote. But this is a good one because, but I do confess this to you. So he's going to say, but let me make sure I'm clear on this one thing, that according to the way that they talk about, which they call a cult or sect, I worship and serve the God of our fathers in that way. And then he goes on to say that according to everything written in the law and the prophets, I serve the God of our fathers. Because why? Everything that was, what did Jesus say? Everything in the law and the prophets is about me.
It is.
Right? Everything in the law and the prophets points to Christ, points to the Messiah, points to fulfillment of prophecies that the Jews are well aware of and looking for, and they missed it. And Paul is telling them again here now that they missed it. How many times have he said this now to these guys? I mean, they're hearing it over and over and over. So now he's making sure, you know what? Again, God lobs the softball. God creates that platform again, and Paul just steps up on it again like another chance to preach the gospel. Every single time he's going to take it. And so he presents the gospel of Jesus is the Christ and the way I do follow, no matter what they say, and that is what I'm talking about. And now he transitions it into the bomb that he dropped in the council. Okay? He says, having hope in God, which these men also do, and the hope is found in that there will be a resurrection both of the righteous and the wicked, or the just and the unjust, or the sheep and the goats, the wheats and the tares, the saved and the unsaved, the saints and the ain'ts, right on down the list, right? That's what we're talking about. There will be. And so that's exactly what he was talking about, in the council, and he divided them at that time. But I want you to see some of this because I wrote a couple references in there that we've probably got time to check out. So flip back, if you will, real quick to refresh our memories as we came through Matthew a few months ago. Go back to Matthew chapter 22. And let's look at what Jesus said about this. We brought this up actually last week. Remember the context of this. It's verse 23 to 32. And we did talk about it last week. So I'm not going to read through the whole thing again this week. It's about the Sadducees questioning him about the resurrection. Remember? And the man has 7 wives, and whose wife is she going to be? And when they all had her, and he says, you do err. Because look at Jesus' answer in verse 29. It says, you do err, or my ESV says, you are wrong, because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry or give in marriage, but are there like the angels in heaven. As for the resurrection of the dead, you have not read what it is said to you by God, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not a God of the dead, but in fact of the living. That's what we're talking about. And his point there is, you call him the God of your fathers, right? Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Aren't they all in the tomb? Aren't they in the grave? Aren't they dead? Why do we say still that it's the God of them? Because they're alive. He's pointing to the fact that they are all going to continue to be alive, and there will be a resurrection. Okay, Daniel 12. You can flip there if you want. I'll read the first couple verses here to you. It says, at that time, this is talking about a later future time, which you can pick up later in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, about the Great Tribulation. It says, at that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, who has the charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, since was and never since was a nation until that time. Here you go. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Clearly a separate resurrection for the righteous, and a different one for the wicked. And so that is what Paul is saying. My hope of the way of the gospel of Christ is found in that. And these men know that I believe that, and that's in fact what I've been accused of. And remember, he kind of wiped out half of that Sanhedrin crowd last time by saying that, and he got out of that situation. Okay, so now he says, in view of this, because this is cool. In view of what? Because I follow the way. Because I'm a Christ follower, because I'm a Christian, I do my best to live right by my conscience before God and all men. There's application for you. Are you a Christ follower? Do you try to live with a good conscience and a clean conscience before God and men, because that's what we're called to do. Okay, so Paul's saying, I've done this. And remember, he said that to them before, that I've been living by the law of God and by doing the things that he wants us to do. By following Christ, I'm doing that. Okay? So he's saying he is living the life that God intended following Christ. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to be living the life that God intends for us through Christ. We're called to be believers. We're called his children. Then you know what? We're called to live a life worthy of the calling by which we've been called. Period. Okay? That's what he's saying. And he's saying, I'm doing that. So these guys just aren't on the same page. They just don't believe this, but it doesn't make it not so, right? So now he brings up the fact of what he's even doing in Jerusalem. And remember, we talked about this a little bit last week, that when he didn't know who the high priest was. Remember that? When the high priest gave orders for him to be slapped in the face. And they said, do you revile the high priest? Which was against the law. And he said, whoa, I didn't know. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't have done that if I knew he was the high priest. Point being that from about the last 20 years, he's been, after he was converted, he went to Tarsus, where he was from, and he went back there and lived there for a while. He went to Jerusalem one time, but then Barnabas came and took him to Antioch, and that was the time they then started the mission journeys, which took the better part of 10 and 11 years on those 3 journeys. Okay, so the better part of 20 years, he's only been in Jerusalem in and out on brief little things to other what was happening, and he hasn't been around. So that's why we said he really what the high priest looked like, possibly, or who he was. Same thing here. He says, this is what happened. I came up after several years. That's the several years we're talking about. Now he comes up to bring alms and offerings to my nation. Why is that significant? Anybody know? Why would that be significant? What is he saying he's bringing? What is he doing?
Supporting the church.
Good, man. Yeah, and even more so,
Tithing.
supporting the nation that isn't even the church. That's Jerusalem, his nation, his national brothers and sisters. Of course, they were bringing back the gifts to the church, but now he's saying, I'm bringing alms and offerings, which is monies to help the poor, to help the dire situation that maybe they're in economical times, to do my part, to go and bring monies back to Jerusalem to help and to do my part. So he's saying, look, not only am I living a life of good conscience as a Christian, as a believer of this way, but I'm also doing my part to be a good citizen and to be a good Jew. I'm bringing money back to the nation and I'm paying my taxes, right? I'm giving my part and giving more than what I should be doing. And that's why I'm here. So now these charges against me are just so astronomically crazy that this is the purpose I come for. I didn't come to cause any ruckus or riots, okay? So he's showing the intent that he had and why he is stepping foot back into the city and why it's been so long and what he's doing here now.
You think he said that also because some of the guys that were against him, the Pharisees or whatever, all these Sadducees, were maybe doing that? They were not helping out or, paying their taxes,
Good call. Yeah, there could have definitely been some intended or unintended kind of silent charges of hypocrisy.
Right.
Yeah, towards them, little things like that, certainly, speculation, but sure.
Right, like saying, okay, sure. I follow Christ, I'm a good guy.
I'm doing things that you guys ain't doing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, all the people that are against him trying to get him killed, with, Paul doing that, bringing back and supporting that, they're benefiting from that.
Right.
So he's like,
I'm not holding it towards you.
I'm against them. I'm
right.
not against them. I'm doing stuff for them. Like, I can't be.
Good.
Not only am I not against
right, not
them,
am I staying away. You've been trying to kill me and persecute me, but I'm actually coming to do good by you, and do right by you, and to do the right thing. Yeah, good.
Pretty good argument.
Which is how he can say, my conscience is free to God and man, because I'm doing what I know I'm supposed to be doing and what I'm called to do. Okay. So, now as we continue on, and I'm glad we found some application and we want to try to do that, because it can be tough, you guys. I sit there as I'm studying, and it's like, even in my notes, of the PowerPoint, some of it's just like, I'm just kind of writing down exactly what the scriptures say, and, you're just following along there, and it's like, why do I do that? But it's different when you get to narratives like this. You know what I mean? When we're going through, say, Romans, or other studies that we're doing, there's doctrine and theology, and there's teaching and deeper understanding and things that come. This is really like a narrative. It's like a historical dialogue of just an event that happened. You see what I'm saying? So it's real easy for us. So I want to pause to bring this up to our attention, that it's easy for us to just read this account and be like, okay, I got it. So this guy took him, he said this, he did this. Yeah, we get it's a story, and I get it. And for some of us, I've heard it before. Got it. Okay, good. I want to urge you and urge myself all week last week to not do that. Let's come to the text, and as we've already prayed a couple times, ask the Holy Spirit to give us something, because He will, because this is living and breathing, and He can give us different points of application and open our eyes to new things, perhaps, that we haven't seen before. So we want to definitely draw attention to those kinds of things, and these questions and discussions are good, because it's really easy to just easily read through this and be like, okay, got it. So let's definitely not try to do that and check our brains at the door, if you will, which I don't really have that problem here with this group ever. So I appreciate and love you guys for that. So good. So now he continues on. He says, when they found me in the temple. So I've been gone, I came, now they found me, and the crowd was not in any uproar. They found me in there, nothing was happening. Just like he said, they didn't find me talking to no one, they didn't find me stirring up a muck anywhere, and when they came up to me, nothing like that was happening. They just came up because they wanted to, and nothing was due to what they were trying to charge me with. Now we get to the Jews from Asia again. But there were Jews from Asia, and look at what he says. They ought to be here. They should be here before you to accuse me if I did anything wrong. Why? Because, dude, look. Or let me go with the next sentence too. Or let these men here tell you what wrong I did, because they already heard me. This is the same council that he spoke to a few years ago of Sanhedrin, that Lysias had to rip him out of there because they were going to kill him because they were divided. Remember that? So they found nothing wrong in me in that trial. They're here again, and he's going back to now these Jews. These Jews from Asia were the ones in chapter 21 that caused the whole thing in the temple and started the ruckus and the people wanting to get him. So the point is, he's saying, look, the people that started this whole thing, they're not even here. The ones that started this whole mess, they should be here. They're not even here. So where are they to stand up for what they're saying? And now these guys who are here in front of you now are just on their coattails, and I've already spoken before them, and why are we doing this again?
They're lingering.
So, and Paul's attitude, I'm sure, was better than mine would be, because Paul's more patient and understands that God had a purpose. These men of the Sanhedrin are hearing the gospel yet again, right? And so is Felix, okay? So what the Lord's going to do with that is his business. So they started it all. They should be here. And as he says again, other than this one thing, okay? So it says they found nothing wrong before the council other than this one thing that I cried out, that I said. What was the one thing? The hope of the resurrection. It was the bomb. Really, when he's saying that, think about it. He said the one thing, and we don't know what side or what degree, how many were Pharisees, but just say 50-50 for the sake of discussion. So he drops the bomb and says the thing, and really half the crowd still didn't think he said anything wrong and did anything. See what I'm saying? So only half the Sanhedrin says something was wrong with what he said. The majority, or some of them, don't think there's anything wrong with what he said.
What is he saying when he says, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purifying the temple?
Okay, good. Sorry. What verse? 18.
18.
Good. So while they found me, yes, that's when the Jews found it, because remember what he was doing. That goes back to chapter 21 when they caught him. Yeah, the Nazarene vow. Remember that James church had said, hey, be a good Jew and go for them, and Paul did that, and he took the 4 men, remember, that were having the Nazarene vow, and he said, you pay for their offering and for them to shave their heads, the vow is over, and go purify yourself in the temple to show that essentially you're a good Jew, you do live by the law, you are right on with the Jews. So he went and did a purifying cleansing of himself, and when he went into the temple, he showed the Jews that he had done that. So that's the evidence the Jews would purify themselves through ritual things before they would enter into the temple. Okay, so by him being in the temple, he's showing everybody, I'm pure and I'm cleansed and I'm fine. Okay, so that's what he's saying. So he's saying, I'm doing that, and these guys are still coming and attacking me. And they're not even here to tell you what they're attacking me on, and I was the one doing the right thing, bringing about the money. He's just laying out more of his case that is just so easy to judge.
I wonder why they weren't there.
What's crazy is now that you've narrowed it down to that one thing, it's like, well, if he's on trial and should die, then like, I mean, if it's really just comes down to that one thing,
right?
Like, oh, you should die too, because
right.
Like, there's really no difference.
Right. Good.
Like, what is the difference? Now that I bring it up, like,
that's right.
I don't even.
And that's what he's saying. I only said one thing that caused controversy. And it really is just causing controversy. There was nothing wrong with what he said. There's no punishment, there's no wrongdoing what he said. Or to Sam's point, then all the Pharisees would be held as criminals and being punished or imprisoned or killed.
So why did the ones that do believe in resurrection, why were they upset? Just because
the whole
the name
Jesus thing, that's it.
It's just that name.
The sect.
So he could almost, even if it was just that one name.
That's it.
That's crazy.
That's the power in the name.
That's what the
divisiveness in the name. That's all it is. They say the sect, the cult. He's of that. We're done with that. We want to be done with that. Remember, they got to wipe out. We talked about that. That's right. We talked about that in the Matthew study. How they wanted to cut this thing off with Jesus and stop it there, and it was just going to continue on and on. So they're trying to cut off the apostles. Now they're trying to wipe out the church. Just on and on and on. Satan's still doing it today. It's still happening.
Yeah, they believe in the resurrection. They just don't believe in the stuff.
Right. They just don't believe in Jesus and what he's preaching and teaching as the Messiah.
Yeah.
Yep.
They
That's
believe
exactly
in
right.
the Messiah prophecy, but they don't believe in Jesus.
Right. That's right. They believe in the Messiah. They believe the resurrection that the Messiah will say and all that stuff. But Jesus is not that guy. So you got to die.
I just forgot that it got to the point, and I forgot that it's that ridiculous.
Right. You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Verse 1 tells us that Tertullus was not the only person to speak.
Yes.
And the high priest and all of the elders and the lawyer,
Good.
they all made charges against
They're all
him.
there.
It doesn't say how long that took. It's easy to believe that took quite a while.
Right.
This chapter is a case study in relying on facts when you're accused and trusting God with the facts.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah, amen. That's exactly right. He just stated them. And whatever's flying at him, he's still just going to state what he knows is true and stand faithful with God. And look, he's going to say later in the next chapter, I believe it is 25, he's going to sit there and say, look, if I did anything deserving of death, I'm not scared to die. I'm right here. Like, I'll take the punishment. You know what I mean? So God's will be done. Exactly,
It's
Jeff's point.
interesting elsewhere in 1 Corinthians, Paul makes a fascinating statement. He says, my conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. Now here he talks about having a clear conscience because of the facts
That he is innocent.
he is innocent.
Right.
But elsewhere,
Yeah. Good.
he says just the opposite.
Amen.
Well, it makes
That's
more-
interesting.
It makes more sense too that they told us when he comes in, he's talking about, I'll make this quick, because they probably
Right.
It's probably getting late
And now
at
it
that
ain't.
point
Yeah.
because all those other people went.
Right.
You know, it's like
We're going to see that in the next chapter as well. That the Jews want favors. They keep wanting favors, and we see at the end of the chapter it says they did them a favor. In the next chapter, we're going to see they do the Jews another favor. So they're definitely about scratching each other's backs when it can be beneficial and helpful to their side or to both sides. Excuse me. So
Paul refers to himself as a chief of something as well in Timothy. It's like I'm the worst of the worst.
that's right.
You know what I mean? So
I'm the horrible.
But-
That's right.
There's
right.
that big butt out there.
yeah.
That's right.
But
That's right. Now Felix, let's see. He commanded Paul to be kept in custody, but they be given liberties, because now Felix, having a more accurate knowledge of the way, look at that verse 22. Because Felix, like we said, was there for a good time. He was aware of this Christian movement and the things that were happening. And so he puts them off. He just stops it there and says, you know what? When Lysias, the commander, comes down, then I'll decide your case. We're going to see this as a popular practice too. Look, Pilate didn't want to hear Jesus' case. Okay? He sent him off to Herod because he was in his district and said, hey, he's under your authority. You judge him. And he sent him. And Herod sent him back and said, nothing wrong with him. Okay, same thing that's happening here. So whoever's jurisdiction it's under is what's going to keep. They're going to keep passing the puck here with Paul as well, because that's what's happening here. Is Felix is just listening to this, going like, I don't want to do anything here. Like, I don't want any part of this. So he's saying, well, he puts it off and delays and says, we'll wait for Lysias to come now, even though he has the letter from Lysias. So we're going to wait for Lysias now to come, and I want to hear him and see what he has to say, and we'll decide your case at that point. Okay, so now in the interim, though, something has to be done with Paul. So he's going to be held in custody, but he's allowed liberties, right? We see that as a Roman citizen, obviously. So as a Roman citizen, he's part of an ongoing trial right now, but he's being accused of things. But look, they haven't been proven true. So he's not guilty. So they're not going to like put him in prison right now. They're going to hold him, and kind of detain him, and he's still going to have liberties. And in fact, guys, look, when we end the book situation, when we talked about Paul's first imprisonment, and it's called a situation, that's what we're talking about, because it's still going to be, the answer still hasn't come down. He's going to go and appeal all the way to Caesar. And just like the Supreme Court thing, that's going to take a while. Process. So this is part before that trial even, that house arrest. This is just kind of a detainment period, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the chapter.
I know this has come up before, but I'm not clear on it. So like this whole time, like the Romans that are, in charge here, like what God do we think that they pray to in this thing?
Multiples. Multiple.
Yeah, okay, so they're Gentiles. The Romans are Gentiles.
Right. Yeah, for certain. And they would be worshiping, their
mythology,
heathen pagan gods
stuff,
of
mythology.
Yeah, exactly.
They're really worried, the Roman leaders, they're really worried about like burning a bridge. So
Well, remember, they're not even as concerned about burning the bridge with the Jews as burning their own hide. The problem is, like the Pontius Pilate thing, the Jews play that card because if there's dissension and chaos and riots going on in your province that you're in charge of, and now I'm the governor over you, going like, look, bro, you can't take care of this, you can't handle this stuff. See, they use that sharp edge of the sword to do that. It's not that they want to do a favor to the Jews because they like the Jews. They want to do a favor to the Jews to stay in good rapport with their authorities so the Jews don't go telling on them and get them in trouble, which is what the guy just tried to do to Lysias. That's what these Jews just brought up about the commander and said, he came by force and took him from us when we should have done this. See what I mean? That's what they're playing. And so that's the card they constantly keep playing.
They're going to be in trouble either way because he would have whooped them.
Certainly.
He's a Roman citizen.
Certainly.
So they can't really
but they kind of don't, they get this whole tunnel vision and they don't care about that. All they care about is kill Jesus, kill Jesus, kill Jesus, get Paul, get Paul, get Paul. They come together even over their big differences for the common enemy of kill this thing, stop this thing. They don't care.
It's
So
interesting that Felix's wife is a Jew. I don't believe the Bible records what her beliefs are.
good. Well, let's talk about that. Let's get right to that. Thank you. Let's get to Felix coming down now. So it says, Felix, a couple days later, came down with his wife Drusilla, who was a Jewess. So, right, Drusilla is Felix's wife. She is a Jew. She is not a good Jew, because you're right. It's not like we hear biblical accounts, but in historical accounts, you find out several things about these characters. One, Felix is not a good governor. Okay, this guy we're talking about right now, he's not a good dude. He's an evil guy. The next governor we're going to find in the next chapter, Festus, that takes over office after him, is a noble man and is much more trustworthy and is a better one. And that's who Paul's going to go before next. But this Drusilla, not only is she a Jewess, but she's in the line of the Herods, which we keep coming back and talking to. If you haven't realized how wicked and horrible the Herods are, that's all they are. When you hear Herod, you should just think horrible. Okay, so, and they all were called Herods. That's kind of like Pharaoh, you know, the name of the king, or Abimelech. They weren't all named Pharaoh or Abimelech, right? That means like King Charles, king on and on and on. So with this, what a Herod is they're the king, but they weren't descendants of Judah. They weren't descendants of David, okay? They were chosen by Roman authorities. When Rome took charge and took over Jerusalem, Rome took out and stopped Jerusalem's line of kings and said, we're going to put people in place to be kings here that we want, because why? We're still over those kings, but we'll have a Jewish king to do all the Jewish things that still is under our thumb. And so they implanted men that they wanted to be the king to suit their purposes. And they were all hideous. Starting back with, we've gone through this list a bunch, but Herod the Great was the first one. That's the one in early book of Matthew that tries to kill baby Jesus and all the 2-year-old boys in the Bethlehem area. He wipes all them out. His son was Herod Antipas, who throws John the Baptist in prison for the whole Herodias dancing thing with his niece and his brother's wife that he stole, and John the Baptist called him out, remember that? And he beheaded and kills John the Baptist. Then Herod the Great's grandson is then Herod Agrippa, who is the next one, and he is the one who we've seen in chapter 12 killed James the Apostle and put Peter in prison, was going to kill him, but remember the angel came and let Peter out. So this is the line of kings that we're talking about. This Drusilla is the daughter of King Agrippa that we just talked about in chapter 12, killed James. His daughter is this Drusilla, and we're going to find out also that he has another, back that up, I said that wrong. King Agrippa from chapter 12 has a son named Agrippa II. He also has a daughter named Drusilla and another daughter named Bernice, who we're going to meet next chapter. So these three are all in the line of that. So this Drusilla we're talking about tonight, Felix's wife, this will show you what a winner Felix is. Felix is married to that woman that is in that lineage, and she is, of the same, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So that's who we're talking about.
And he's not Jewish, he's Roman.
And also we'll find out, sorry not to cut you off there, that this Bernice in chapter 25 is married to King Agrippa. So the whole brother-sister thing again. So it's just on and on and on with the depravity and the horribleness of this family tree. So that's who I want you to know is Drusilla, and that's who Felix is married to. So he's married into that great family. Okay? So that shows you, or should show you, what kind of governor he was.
So basically, they could put a good Jew in.
Right.
They want to be under their thumb.
Right. They want to
do.
Jew, and right. They want to put in authority who would they want to have in authority. Okay. Good. So this is interesting too, and we can get some application here too. I think that Felix and his wife come, and they sent for Paul, and listen to this, and heard him speak about faith in Jesus Christ. That's awesome. Because, like Jeff said, just continue to be strong in your faith. Whether you're on trial, state the facts, be true to what you know is true, and let God work out all the details. Exactly what we're going to see here again with another opportunity here, another platform here, with a private audience now of the governor and the governor's wife that kind of hold the ballots of Paul's future in their hands. He's going to preach and tell them all about the way. He's going to tell them all about Jesus. And he does. And look at what this says. He had a knowledge. So we know that Felix had a knowledge already and wants to hear more. So he's hearing more, but look at what happens. Also, note this. Think about some of the ways he could have been. I was thinking about this last week. Think about some of the ways he could have known. Obviously, this movement is spreading around. It's being heard. But look, we already talked about Philip in chapter 21. When Paul got to the shore and he got to Caesarea before he went up to Jerusalem, he stayed in the house of Philip. Remember one of the 7 deacons? Remember that? And that's where Agabus told him and took his belt, told him about the prophecy. When you go to Jerusalem, this is what's going to happen. That was Philip, who was one of the 7. And what's he called? His label is Philip the Evangelist. He's in Caesarea. You think he's telling people about Christ? Certainly he is. Go all the way back to that first Gentile convert we've seen. Was in chapter 10, was a Roman Italian centurion by the name of Cornelius. Guess where he lives? Caesarea. Okay, so the people that we've already seen God planting a church in Caesarea, just like we followed Antioch more, we're just seeing, look, Caesarea, there's a church too. Cornelius, the centurion, is part of it. So is Philip the Evangelist, one of the deacons, and on and on and on with what's happening there. And I just thought that an interesting detail and an interesting thing for us to note. To recognize that there's believers here, okay? There's believers all over the place now. And so I want us to note that, okay? But he keeps sending. It says, he sent frequently. We're going to see later on that he sends for him again to hear more about it. But here's the difference. When we talk about how God must do the work and how he opens hearts and he doesn't, and opens ears and he keeps ears closed. Look at what he does here. When he tells him of the gospel and of the ways of Christ and of God, of righteousness, of self-control, that would be a big one to a Roman governor, okay? Of self-control and impending judgment, or the coming judgment. Look at what it says next when he heard about the coming judgment. Felix became frightened. He was alarmed and sent him away. Dude, that is the power of the truth of the gospel. In my own life, I've seen that as well. I'm sure many of you have. That people that see it and hear it from you will just absolutely turn and run the other way. Some will listen. Some will rebut and argue with you and be spiteful about it. But some just are totally deterred and got to go. Because why? Because you're shining a big old light in their darkness.
Yep.
Right? That's what he's talking about. That's what we're talking about. That's what's happening here. Because as soon as he finds out about this, he is like, oh, I'm good. I got to go. I'll hear you next time more. And
I left the stove on.
yeah. And I'll send for you when I get time again. But notice this, because there's the conscience still. Because as he heard about a God and a judgment of a righteous God, his conscience was struck and he had to run the other way.
That's a service on Sunday. That's what he preached on Sunday.
Yep. And I marked this as a cool thing to me. It says in some of them that he trembled, that he was shaking or alarmed. And I was thinking, you know what? He heard of that and he was trembling right there before Paul. And in fact, as a prisoner on trial, Paul should be the one trembling before him. Yeah. The governor who has his life in his hands, so he thinks. Paul knows clearly who has whose life in whose hands. Yep. And he preaches the truth and watches this man tremble in the fear of God by his conscience of what he just preached. I think that's pretty cool. So,
and another thing, if Felix held his composure. I mean, it's so easy for, if you get a crowd saying kill him, it's so easy for somebody in charge to say, you know what,
jump in there,
do it and get it over with.
Essentially, that's what Pilate did.
Yeah, all the like Jeff was saying, all the evidence was. Paul knew that he was right. I mean, this is if I'm in the truth, and God knows I'm in the truth, what do I got to fear about?
That's right.
So God calmed him down. He spoke. The words he said turned everything around.
And in that, again, we see God's sovereignty, because as you just said that, it just kind of kicked to remembrance of me. I was remembering chapter 12 because we just brought it up. That James was before Herod Agrippa and had the same opportunity, and it didn't come out the same way. Same with John the Baptist, right? James got killed, Peter got away. And in fact, the Lord let Peter get away. He made a way for him to get out, and he didn't make a way for James to get out. So in what you were saying, you're exactly right. And right on, obviously, with Jeff's point earlier, to be truthful to the Lord and do what you know is right, stick to it. And even if he doesn't let you out of jail.
You're right.
Right? Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego? Yeah. Even if it doesn't happen, I'm still going to be faithful. I'm still going to do it. The good Lord giveth and he taketh away, like you were to quote from Job earlier. That's what we're talking about. But praise be to God, okay? No matter what.
Yeah, don't change.
And that's the strength. That's the perseverance of the saints. To the very end, when you know God can save you, but you recognize he's not going to. Because at a certain point, James recognized, right? And John the Baptist recognized, as the sword comes out, right? As you're led to the road, you know he's not saving you here. But he's already saved you. Praise God. Did you have a thought?
Yeah, that thing with Pilate, when he let it happen, he still washed his hands of it, so he still had that guilt.
That's right.
But he couldn't, that's why he wasn't washing his hands as a good guy. He's like, no, it's not my fault, it's not my fault.
Right. He was trying to get out of it, that's right. And essentially, like why you said, he just gave in after all the chaos.
That was even worse there.
What happened with that too? Like I don't remember what part, but like Jesus told him the truth basically, and it did kind of. That's where he kind of washed his hands too. Like
because he knew.
Like what's going on with Paul? Like you think he would be mad and be aggressive, but he was
not
scared enough to be like, I'm kind of mad at you, but just go away from me because
Well, that's the
I
key,
believe
is
you
that
enough to not
God
mess
did
with
not
you.
change his heart in that moment,
Definitely not
obviously.
gonna change today,
He's
yeah.
still a pagan and a heathen and a sinner that hasn't been changed. And so in the light of that, he's now lacking the integrity we see here too. So we see, obviously, an unconverted heart because he's put off by the judgment that his conscience tells him to rebel from and to be defiant of. But now also, we see the integrity that he truly has because it also says, for he was hoping to get a bribe from Paul. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, he keeps bringing him up because he's listening more, but it's turned to the point now why he keeps bringing him up now is he wants Paul to give him a bribe to get out of it. And so I was thinking about that, and probably some of you have the same question, like, how does Paul have any money? He's in prison. How's he going to pay him a bribe? Doesn't really make any sense. But, however, Paul has many friends in Caesarea that are all outside praying and all outside waiting. And he has liberties right now of people coming in. We just read it. Let them come and minister. Do not prevent them from attending to his needs. Why does he say that? Because they can bring him money and come pay me, and I'll take care of this thing for a fee. You follow me?
Yeah.
Lace the palms. Tell your friends.
Grease it, baby.
Next time I come back, well, I'll hear more about this. Wink, wink. I'll hear more about this next time I come. Yeah, Jeff.
It's interesting to think that if Felix was on the take, then Tertullius could have offered him money for his death.
I know. Good call. Yeah, how did they not know that? They knew those things too. Only by the sovereign grace and will of God. That's all. So he sends for Paul often because obviously he wants to get the money. And we close in verse 27 with after a 2-year time period. So Felix's term comes to an end 2 years later, and he's succeeded by Porcius Festus. Because look at what happened. It said, desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left him in prison. So yeah, he's got liberties. Yeah, he's got these things, but he's still under Roman, authority and imprisonment to whatever degree he is. And we know God's using that, look, to protect him. Okay, but realize this is 2 years. And again, this is not the 2 years of house arrest later. That's in the end of Acts when we get there. We're not there yet. So in fact, what we call his first 2-year house arrest time, there's a 2-year period here before that he's really in prison in the same situation. So why we in fact call the next 2-year period, the first one, I don't know. We're just sticking with it because this wasn't truly called an imprisonment. This is like a detainment, right? If you're being tried on trial, you're going to be held, right? If I've done a big crime and I'm going to be held, I'm still guilty. I'm still innocent till proven guilty, yes? Right. In a court of law. But we know how long that takes to get due process to happen in this country. It's not like it was much better in Rome unless they were, wanting to do it deliberately to somebody in their own reasoning. But it takes a while. And so you're still going to be held. You might get on bail with a thing on your ankle. I mean, whatever it is, you're still going to be detained until the actual hearing. So just picture that's what we're talking about. He's in detainment, waiting for the hearing, which hasn't come yet. It comes when he gets to Rome, which is the journey we're about to start on next chapter. Okay, but this thing is, he wants to do the Jews a favor, and he just lets Paul sit there for 2 years because, catch this too, here's another part. Go back to what I said a few minutes ago. He doesn't want to decide this case. He doesn't want to deal with this. So he knows the Jews will be happy if I keep him in prison. And guess what? It's beneficial for me to do that because now I can leave this for the guy coming next. I don't have to deal with this at all. I'm done with this thing. The next guy's coming up. I'm out of term, and I don't need to have this case as my last thing. I'm not dealing with this. And you're coming on board? Great. That's awesome. I got a case to tell you got right now waiting for me. And that's what he's passing the puck. Okay.
He had the opportunity to release him too, right?
He could have.
Right. You think he's trying to keep in good hands with the people that were gracing him? You know what I'm saying? Say, well, and I'm surprised nobody killed Paul. Nobody did kill Paul if he had the liberty to go in and out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there'd still be his liberties would still be. There'd still be Roman soldiers.
Gotcha. Okay.
There'd still be Roman soldiers around him. That's right. You'd still have Roman soldiers, all around him.
Witness protection right there.
That's right. That's exactly right. But still in that though, the church was allowed to come and go as they please, and he could be ministered to, and he could go and do his things, but it was
Only guy.
under that ruling of Romans still.
It
Okay.
kind of has like an air to it though. It's like
Right.
a hint of like he was almost expected to, when he was retired, his final term, like he was almost expected to kind of let him go or something. And just the way it's worded, it has that air to it. Like he went out of his way to do them a favor by keeping him in there. Like
Right.
presidents do that all the time. They do that, right?
Yeah. Because they don't want to deal with
Let
it.
everybody out. They let like 10 people out of jail.
Parties,
Yeah.
Happens all the time. I don't know.
Good.
It made it sound like he was almost expected to let him go, but he did him a favor and kept him in there. Like,
Yeah.
it's worded on.
Well, they did, but he was doing himself his own favor too, because he didn't want to do it. So he was leaving it. Good.
The Jews
Awesome.
The Jews couldn't bribe the Romans to kill him, because if the Romans killed him after the Jews bribed him, they'd have the Roman
Answer for that.
body short and kill us. because
Exactly
they'd
right.
dress him up and,
Yeah.
but if you're a condemned man, nobody listens to a condemned man.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Good. Kind of how it works. Good. Excellent, guys. Thank you. Have a great night.